Okay, and now we have Luca Izzo talking about classical novae.
All right,
Please.
yes. Let me first thank the organizer for giving me the opportunity to talk about probably the most boring story doing astrophysical trends, because cataclysmic variable are general polluting or looking for new supernova or something else. But I'm trying to convince you that this is not true, thanks in particular to the high resolution capability of some instruments, including not at FIES. So for someone that does not know, and I know that there are people in the audience what are classical novae, they are explosions happening on the surface of white dwarfs that are in a binary system composed by, of course, a white dwarf and a companion star, which is generally a late time main sequence star, or in some cases a red giant. In this case, we talk about symbiotic novae. So when the matter piles up on the surface of just let a white dwarf exploding on the surface of a white dwarf, temperature increase and pressure increase at the bottom of the accreted layer of the white dwarf, leading to ignition of CNO thermonuclear reaction like the senior cycle. And when we have the final ignition, we have the expansion of the accreted layer. And actually recently, thanks to the multivariate observation and detection in gamma rays on novae, we know that there is actually, it has been proposed a new scenario for these events that is composed by sort of two ejecta components, one slower and another one much faster, that catches up the slower ejecta emission of gamma rays. But just a slide showing what is the phenomenology of classical novae. Looks like supernova 1A, but the main difference is that the time scale varies. So we have always the rapid rise due to the adiabatic expansion of the fireball and then late decline. But the time scale really much depends on the mass of the primary white dwarf. More massive white dwarfs need less accreted matter in order to emit. Gravity is much higher on the surface of massive white dwarf. And this implies that for massive white dwarf, the time scale is much faster. We have evolution of the order of few days, while for low massive white dwarf, we can have also our nova lasting for 1 year. That's not, doesn't matter. And what is one of the main role of the high resolution? This is not a noisy spectra. This is a spectrum which is characterized by hundreds of absorption lines. Indeed, in the brightest phase, that are also the most optically thick phase, classical novae, we can witness actually can measure abundance composition of these events and measure a lot of physical properties, including one of the main ones, the expanding velocities through the classical movement of the p sigma profile. This is just an example of the Cassian tool, and these are a lot of narrow absorption lines. Just I want to show you how we have arrived to this scenario, because with high resolution spectra, we have contributed to this new proposal. So this is a nova that was observed in 2013, V9 Centauri. Another nice thing of classical novae is that we can use still romantic names, so naming the name of the constellation where they have exploded, not like 80 or blah, 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 but 77 number. Anyway, I hope that you cannot see because the projector, but here, this is the Fermi-Lat satellite observing gamma rays of the order of 100 MeV range. This is the optical light curve of this nova. Here is detection. There are two episodes of detection in gamma rays, and all the arrows are upper limits. We managed to get spectrum at high resolution of this nova at different depths, in particular, at the very beginning, before the onset of the gamma rays, where we measure only one expanding absorption using the very famous sodium neutral interstellar absorption as a reference. We have the velocities of the order of 500 km per second, but then after only 3 days at the onset of the gamma rays, we see an apparent acceleration due to the interaction of the dogs. And then at the end of the first episode, last detection in Fermi-Lat, we have the appearance of a second velocity component at much higher velocity. And this happened also at following epochs during the second bright gamma ray events, where we have a multiple component. Well, this is only the sodium light, but you can see this also in Balmer and other. And more recently, we have observed this also in narrow absorption. But the narrow absorption features not display two components, just display the acceleration after the onset of the interaction of the gamma ray emission. This led to an astronomy paper that presented for the first time the evidence of the scenario. Now, what are these narrow absorptions that are visible only thanks to the high resolution and, of course, spectrograph at high resolution? These are mainly composed of iron peak elements like, of course, iron, but we also detect scandium, titanium, yttrium, and only display a single velocity, the slow one, so they belong to the first slow expansion. More interestingly, in still the Nova Centauri, we have detected interesting that they are sort of lanthanide like strontium-2 and barium-2 and lithium-1. And lithium-1 is really interesting. As I will show after this slide, I want to show some spectral sequence obtained with the node, thanks to Johan that also. And we indeed published the ATEL, the classification of this node from the first spectrum. That zoom in this region shows how just after 3 days, all the narrow features disappear. This is simply to the fact that the ionization level of the photosphere increased because as the ejecta expand, the density decreased, then the photon field from the photosphere level of the most external ejecta. Let's come back to lithium. So lithium is one of the most important elements in astrophysics, not only because it's the only metal produced in bang nucleosynthesis, and not only because thanks to lithium, your Mac can run. I can show the presentation. Probably also people that are looking at their smartphone can set all this presentation. And thanks lithium for this. But it's also very reactive. So lithium is easily destroyed in almost all astrophysical processes or batteries. But in the 70s, some theoretician proposed the fact that during the thermonuclear runaway leading to the nova explosion, we can have the formation of lithium through this reaction, the helium and an alpha particle, which also happens in the sun, but the sun does not have a very high convective motion that can bring beryllium on the external layers of the photosphere, where lithium can survive. Once beryllium decays, and this is the only decay of beryllium-7, the electron capture into lithium. Actually, there is another channel of beryllium that produces boron, but its probability is almost 0.11%. So beryllium decays almost in. From our measurement, using galactic chemical evolution codes, we have demonstrated that novae can in principle can explain actually overabundance of lithium that we observe in meteorites and also in some stars. This is an old plot made in 2015, but there are other plots maybe I can show later. I did not have to. I just want to show you that we have detected lithium, the resonance line of the lithium-1 transition in few novae so far, because it's very hard to find this element due to the fact that the ionization level varies quite a lot during the nova evolution. And in addition to Nova Centauri, we have detected lithium in this other nova. You can see that actually we use always generally the sodium line as a reference for the velocity, for the expansion velocity of the expanding ejecta. And in this case, yes, sodium and also the calcium 1, okay, calcium 2. But actually, the main results come from something that unfortunately we cannot observe, and I was hoping that probably with the NT we can observe, but we cannot observe neither. The parent element, the resonance transition of the parent element, the beryllium-2, whose transition happens at this wavelength, 313 nanometers, and we have detected this beryllium feature in all novae for which we have looked for. And using some canonical measurement, well, just using equivalent to it for the measurement of the abundance, but we are developing spectral codes. We arrived at an estimate of the lithium yield from the sample of novae that we have observed. Unfortunately, high resolution implies that you can observe only very bright objects, and novae, we observe novae at a rate of 10 dozen per year, and not all of them are very bright. And in some cases, we also cannot observe them because we can use only at the moment UVs to observe range or HS. In any case, also here there is a gray band that you cannot see, but I know from here that is almost the lithium yield that all theoretical models have proposed so far, while our yield is much higher. This is what I like to call the galactic lithium tension. In a world full of tension, I introduce other galactic lithium. mentioned. And it seems that with the observable field, we can explain overabundance of lithium. With the theoretical one, depends on which kind of field you are considering. It's also a debate between the theory. And also, novae are the stellar population giving rise to novae, not unique, because this is the distribution of classical novae in our galaxy as a function of the galactic latitude. You can see that low novae, this is the logarithm of the velocity of the A, low novae are mainly observed at higher latitudes, so in the bulge or then the bulge or the halo of the galaxy, while fast novae mainly in the disk. This is a hint of the fact that massive novae are more concentrated in regions where metallicity is different than in the center. And indeed, very recently, Scuti and Molaro, using some of our results for novae that are in the thick disk, have explained that only for the thick disk, novae can explain the overabundance of lithium. Our sun is. Okay, last slide about a very recent argument. Novae are sometimes when we have a red giant companion, we have that the white dwarf is literally embedded in the wind of the red giant. So when there is the explosion of the white dwarf, the ejecta gives rise to a shock wave that propagates in the wind of the red giant. And since the density of the red giant decreases from the central red giant, the shock accelerates. The result of the Rankine-Hugoniot equation. Anyway, this nova is a famous recurrent nova and also a proposed supernova name progenitor candidate, has been detected by FIES and MAGIC at the energy of the order of E. This is the first, probably one of the few novae that also other novae have been detected in THEA, but not symbiotic novae. And it seems that the best explanation for this emission is the interaction of protons that are accelerated by the shock with elements, generally protons, of the wind of the red giant. It's an hadronic interaction. And this is a spectrum. We got some spectra from the NOT and also other facilities of these outbursts. Fortunately, we should observe only when it was possible to technical night and service night and our time available. It's okay. It seems that high resolution could serve to nothing. It's not true. Because thanks to the high resolution, we not only could characterize this is galactic absorption of calcium ion. The other absorption corresponds to the wind. This is the product of the wind of the red giant, where the main feature corresponds to the position of the red giant. Two wings, two bumps, something that I've interpreted as a sort of disk or oblated distribution surrounding the binary system. We are working on this, not saying much because we are working also with other groups. Paper. And another interesting result, of course, MAGIC and has published their results using low resolution, well, relatively low resolution of 10,000 or 20,000, but with FIES we could arrive at 3-4 times higher resolution. What they have published in their paper is that the shock waves seems to end after 2 outbursts. It's important because the evolution of the shock waves gives you an information about the dimension of the wind of the red giant. However, with our spectra, which is composed by a spectral sequence obtained with U as TNG and not TNG with ARPS, we have obtain indication that the shocks does not terminate at the day 3, more or less, not shown in 3, but is still detected at day 12. So actually the dimension of the wind seems much greater. These are some consequences on the physical interpretation of the interaction and the origin of the gamma ray. We have made some simulation. Of course, we cannot favor others. Our computation does not favor other scenarios like electronic scenario. Only still hadronic is favored, but we can constrain much better the density of the red giant wind. These are also important consequences on the possible role as a progenitor of type 1a supernova. Particularly with the low resolution spectrum, you also get a different value of the expanding velocity of the other component, which is not the same component that is decelerating, as the MAGIC group mentioned. It's a completely different component. Actually, one of the ejecta of this nova, decelerating at a lower velocity, presented by the MAGIC. I don't know if I hope so. Just to mention you that thanks in particular to the high resolution provided by several spectrographs, we have opened a sort of second life, a golden age for this boring classical novae. And there are still many open questions that we are trying to solve. And I hope that I convince you that novae are not so boring. If they are still so boring, no worries. This is the last talk of the day. We can have to have dinner, fun, and we can talk another day. Thank you very much with this nice slide. And just to mention to you that why I put 7-up. If you know the story, 7-up was made 100 years ago, and there was lithium. But lithium is used, as Kurt Cobain told us, to disturbs on the brain. Indeed, people, US people in particular, realized that people that were drinking 7-up, maybe they were behaving a bit weird. Not that today's situation is different, but in any case, they removed the lithium from the 7-up. So in this case, just to say that novae can enrich the Milky Way with lithium. Sorry for this.